Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 18th of April of 2025. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Moscow because we have very important article there. Russia retains new territories and eases sanctions. New US proposal for Ukrainian settlement, Bloomberg. The US shared with its allies a new plan for settling the conflict in Ukraine. The territories that came under Russian control will remain under Moscow's control. The agreement implies easing sanctions against Russia. Kiev's aspirations to join NATO will also be removed from the agenda. So this is the settlement of Ukraine. This is the project. This is the way how the United States of America see the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. And of course, from the first sign, we can say that the Russians should accept this plan without anything, without any arguing, without anything from their side. But telling the truth, there are lots of very interesting details that I would like to point to attention. So this is the plan of the United States of America, and this plan was proposed by the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And for example, today he gave his own statement regarding the situation, and this is very interesting. He tell one important thing. I can tell you one thing. There is no military solution to this war. There really is not. It will not be resolved because neither side has the strategic capabilities to end this war quickly. He also said that the United States supported Ukraine for 3 years, but now has reached a point where we need to focus on other things. According to him, Washington is not ready to publicly discuss the issue of guarantees for Ukraine's security. So this is the plan, and according to Marco Rubio, the Russians, both the Russians and the Ukrainians, should accept this plan. Otherwise, if somebody, let's say either the Russians or the Ukrainians, will not accept this plan, don't accept this plan, then the United States of America will quit this conflict and will give the Ukrainians to stand for themselves without any support from the United States of America, and obviously without any support, without any sharing with intelligence information. You know that also we got a very interesting report today from Witkov. He said that Ukraine cares less about its Russian-speaking territories. When you start looking at these 5 regions, Russia is interested in them. And by the way, Ukraine is too, but if some of them are mostly Russian-speaking, then maybe Ukraine might care less about them, he said. Trump's special representative also made it clear that when he talks about handing over 5 regions to Russia, he is not talking about their entire territory, but about the part that the Russian army controls. So this is also very important. And now it's time for the Russians and for the Ukrainians to make their final decision. And you know that they don't have much time. They don't have months, years, or weeks to make this decision, to make this solution, because, for example, Donald Trump made it clear that he expects at least Russia to respond to the ceasefire proposal in Ukraine this week. After that, we will make a decision. I believe peace is coming to Ukraine. You know that the next Thursday, a mineral agreement with Ukraine will be signed. This information was also confirmed today that the US and Ukraine have signed a memorandum as a first step towards concluding an agreement on rare earth metals. So according to this agreement, according to this memorandum, according to the statements of Donald Trump, we see that Ukraine most likely will accept this plan. Ukraine most likely will accept that the Russian Federation will control these 5 regions and the war will be finished. But you can ask, so what is the issue? What is the problem from the Russian side? Why the Russians still haven't accepted this proposal? And I would tell you that there is one big issue that nobody haven't resolved yet, and of course we are talking about Ukrainian army, because this new plan that was provided us today by the United States of America, by the Secretary of State Rubio, has not even a single word regarding Ukrainian army, regarding these 800,000 soldiers, regarding these forces, regarding all these brigades. And according to this plan, we see that Ukraine will save their army and they will continue, of course, rearming it. They will continue probably making their army better, and most likely they will continue getting weapons from the Western countries. And it means that maybe in 10, 20 or 30 years we're gonna see another war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And furthermore, for example, today we got another very interesting particle from Ukraine where, according to information we have, the National Guard of Ukraine has revealed the brigades that are part of a new corps formed around the 30th Operational Brigade Khartia. So today the Ukrainians created the second corps of the National Guard, and this corps will include 5 brigades: 3rd Operational Brigade Spartan, 4th Brigade Rubesh, 30th Brigade Khartia, 17th Brigade Raid, and 18th Slaviansk Brigade. And I'll remind you that several days ago we got another very interesting article, and according to this piece of news, let's say Ukraine announced the creation of the first corps, which includes the following brigades: 12th Special Purpose Brigade Azov, 1st Presidential Brigade Burevey, 14th Brigade Krasnaya Kalina, 15th Brigade Karadak, and 20th Brigade Lyubard. So we see that nobody is going to disarm Ukraine, nobody is going to destroy Ukraine army, and we see that according to the new plan of the settlement of conflict, Ukraine will save its army. And obviously this is not something good, and obviously this is not something that the Russians will be able to accept without probably any problems. Obviously they're gonna have some problems while accepting this situation. Anyway, let's return back to the line of combat contact, because there are talks, a lot of talks, but the Russians continue their offensive operation. And during the previous night, the Russians carried out another massive missile strike all over the entire territory of Ukraine. The Russians reported that in the morning, the armored forces of the Russian Federation delivered a group strike by long-range precision weaponry and unmanned aerial vehicles at key unmanned aerial vehicles production facilities and infrastructure objects of Ukraine military airfields. The goals of the strikes have been achieved. All the assigned objects have been engaged. That was stated today by the Russians. And when talking about the previous night, we got a lot of videos from and lots of articles about the situation on the territory of the city of Dnipro. In this video we can see how a civilian was making a video right exactly when the Russians attacked at least this part of the city of Dnipro. We have another episode from another angle. In this video we can see how another civilian was filming the situation on the territory of the city of Dnipro. Lots of explosions, lots of strikes, and this is exactly what most likely the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation was talking about this strike. Furthermore, strikes took place in the southern part of Ukraine in the vicinity of Vovchansk, and of course the Russians attacked the city of Kharkiv. So now let's return back to the line of combat contact, and first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. I'll remind you that yesterday the pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see how the Ukrainians were trying to stop the Russians, were trying to repel the Russian attack towards the settlement of Mala Takhmachka. As for the end of the 17th of April, we still haven't received almost anything regarding the results of this offensive operation. When talking about different mappers, when talking about different military experts, of course everybody adjusted their maps in the Russian favor, showing this southeastern part of the settlement of Mala Takhmachka under complete Russian control. We're talking about these territories. So nobody has doubts that maybe the Russians managed to reach this part of the settlement. We understand that the Russians were trying to take under control this stronghold, this former prison, because this is something like a citadel, and who controls the citadel can control almost the entire Orekhov direction. Anyway, we have lots of changes, so we have different articles, but we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to improve their positions further, and whether the Russians managed to move further in the northwestern direction in the city of Mala Takhmachka. So nobody knows, but telling the truth, several pro-Russian resources reported that those attacks were very bloody from the Russian side. They suffered losses, and they haven't managed most likely to achieve the goals they had at the beginning of those offensives. Anyway, it's just an opinion without any proof, so we are waiting for additional information. But at the same time, we see that the Russians increased their activities to the north of Stepova, Maly Sherbaki, as you can see. And during the previous day, we received lots of videos exactly from this area, where we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the positions of the armored forces of the Ukraine in the fields, between the tree lines, among the fields, and so on. The Russians basically were pummeling out these territories, probably before further attempts to attack in the northern direction. And we also have lots of videos how the Russians were destroying the equipment, communication equipment, radars, probably cameras of Ukraine to the north of the Russian positions. So all these things, all these events, all these icons can mean just one thing. The Russians most likely will try to attack in the northern direction with the purpose to establish some control, some certain control over the main supply lines and supply roads that go from the city of Zaporizhzhia in the direction of Orekhov. So the Russians want to establish some control over this territory and to start destroying Ukrainian vehicles, supply and support that go from the settlement of Zaporizhzhia in the southeastern directions toward the settlement of Orekhov and further in the direction of Mala Takmachka. So we see that the Russians have some plans for this territory, and even if yesterday's attack failed, obviously the Russians are planning to continue. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians, after a very long operational pause, resumed their attempts to attack. And according to information we have, currently the main clashes are taking place on the southeastern part of the settlement of Bogatyr. At least this information today was provided by the pro-Russian resources and by different military pro-Russian experts. As for now, we still haven't received anything that can confirm the presence of the Russian forces on the territory of the settlement. As for now, we have just one video that was published from the central part of the settlement of Constantinople. And in this video, we can see how the Russians were helping civilians from the central part of Constantinople for evacuation. So you can see civilians were evacuating and the Russians were helping them to do this without losses. So because there are lots of drones, there are lots of artillery strikes and so on. I'll remind you that during the previous several days, the Ukrainians were evacuating everything they have from the settlement of Constantinople and the, let's say, vicinity of the settlement of Rozhlev towards the village of Bogatyr. And most likely by the beginning of the 17th of April, the Ukrainians finished the evacuation process, and the Russians, on the shoulders of Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian units that were abandoning their positions, entered the southeastern part of Bogatyr. Once again, there are very heavy clashes and we are waiting for additional updates. At the same time, the Russians continue offensive operation from the southern part, trying to shorten the distance to the Ukrainian positions from the south and to increase the pressure not just from the southeast but also from the south. So the battle for Bogatyr is coming to the probably the final part of let's say this direction. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation for the Pokrovsk direction. So we have lots of very interesting updates from this territory, and probably the most important is the Russian attempt to attack the settlement of Miralubovka. We've been talking about this direction probably since the beginning of April, when the Russians managed to take under complete control the settlement of Yelizavetovka, Novotroitska. And starting this moment, we start receiving lots of videos how the Russians were attacking the villages to the north. We're talking about the settlement of Malinovka and the settlement of Mirna. Lots of FAB. The Russians launched lots of FAB for the position on the positions of Ukrainian forces. And those attacks were just preparation before something bigger. And during the previous 48 hours, the Russians carry out something bigger. They were trying to attack the settlement of Miralubovka, and based on the video that was published by the Ukrainian side, we have adjusted basically every single source adjusted their maps. But when talking about this offensive operation, here we can see almost the same stories that we just discussed in the Orekhov direction. According to different sources, yes, the Russians attacked the territory of Mala Takmachka, but the territory of Miralubovka, but this attack was also repelled by the Ukrainians. The Russians suffered huge losses and were forced to fall back. But this attack and the consequences and the results of this attack is not the most important thing. According to my understanding of the situation, the most important is that this attack was repelled by the 14th Brigade of Chervona Kalina of the National Guard, and this brigade is a part of the 1st Corps that was recently created by the Ukrainians. And when talking about this 1st Corps, 3 brigades of 5 are located in this area. We are talking about the 15th Operational Brigade Karadak, the 14th Brigade Chervona Kalina, which is located on the eastern flank of Pokrovsk. The brigade of 15th is located on the western flanks of Pokrovsk, and in the same direction we can find the 12th Special Purpose Brigade Azov, which is located on the way to the settlement of Konstantinovka. So we see that the first corps is located exactly on the area of possible major battle. According to our understanding of the situation, the major battle of 2025 and probably the special military operation is going to take place exactly in this area between the city of Pokrovsk and the city of Konstantinovka. This is going to be Pokrovsk-Konstantinovka arc major battle. So, and this attack was repelled by this brigade, and obviously this is very interesting and probably very loud sign for the Russians, because now they need to think what to do next, how to handle with new tactics and new formations of the armored force of Ukraine. As for the South Konstantinovka or the Kliban-Bytska direction, we have small adjustments on map based on several pro-Russian resources. The Russians managed to cut the salient to shorten the lines, and the Russians continue offensive further along the N20 road. So probably the Russians also today reported that the Russians managed to secure the village of Valentinovka, and the Russians published this video where we can see how the Russians using a drone destroyed the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of Sukhaya Balka using drones in the central part of the settlement. So the Russians, as you can see, continue offensive operation, and due to this video we expect that during the next 48 hours the village of Sukhaya Balka would be completely secured and cleared and taken by the Russians, and the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back further in the northwestern direction. But the problem with this Sukhaya Balka is very simple. If Ukrainians abandon their positions, then most likely we are going to see a very small but breakthrough of Ukrainian positions, and after the village of Sukhaya Balka, the flower of Sukhaya Balka will bloom, and the Russians most likely will be able to improve their position significantly in the northwestern direction, almost until the city, the village of Romanovka and Zarya. So Sukhaya Balka is very important, let's say, chain of defense, and losing control over this chain would lead to significant consequences for the entire defense of the armed forces of Ukraine. So the general battle is just at the beginning, obviously, but the beginning, as you can see, is very interesting. When talking about the line between the cities of Toretsk and Konstantinovka, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, just regular artillery duels, FPV drone operator drills and so on, without any changes on the ground. The only interesting video we got is that the Russians attacked the Shevchenko micro district with the TOS flamethrower systems, and we believe and expect that after this heavy artillery preparation the Russians made at least several attempts to attack this territory, or are about to start them during maybe this upcoming night between the 18th and the 19th of April. As for now, nothing, just the regular activities. As for the Sivas direction, nothing special. As for the Lyman or Barova direction, currently there are very heavy clashes, and the pro-Russian resources reported that during the previous 24 hours the Russians also made another attempt of offensive operation, almost the same like we had in the Orekhov direction, or like the Russians tried to attack the city of Pokrovsk, something the same, something similar the Russians tried to carry out in the Kupinsk direction, but the results were the same. According to pro-Ukrainian sources and according to several pro-Russian resources, the Russians haven't managed to achieve almost anything and were forced to fall back. Anyway, despite probably failed attempts to attack from the Russian side, they managed to establish complete control, almost complete control over the settlement of Nova. During the previous day, we got lots of geolocations that confirm, let's say, possible Russian presence in different and several buildings on the territory of the settlement. Here we can see Ukrainians were attacking the Russian positions with FPV drones. So we believe that if this is the situation on the ground, then the village of Novo and Lipa would fall in Russian hands in the very near future. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Vovchansk direction. During the previous 24 hours we got another video. This is the video I'm talking about, and here we can see another episode how the Russians tried to destroy another river crossing or pontoon bridge that was used by the Ukrainians for logistic purposes. And you know that this is very interesting because since the 16th of April we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 live videos of how the Russians were attacking and destroying the Ukrainian bridges, pontoon bridges, river crossings along the entire river Vovchansk, which means that the Russians most likely have some plans for this territory. We expect that when the Russians finish with all these bridges, they will start offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the territory between the border and the river of Vovchansk. So when talking about the map, we are talking about the territory, let's say, of something like this. So this might be the territories that the Russians will try to establish control over during the next several days, and this is going to be something like secure zone plan that was announced by the president of the Russian Federation several weeks ago. So this is the situation here. As for the northern Kupiansk, as for the Sumy direction, the Russians continue their offensive operation, but during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, just one video where we can see that the Russians managed to get the village of Garnal, and most likely there are very heavy clashes right now, and maybe this upcoming night the Russians will make another assault operation with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back. As for now, we know just for one thing: the Russians are already on the territory of the village and the clashes continue. Furthermore, the Russians published another video how they managed to establish complete control over Ukrainian vehicles with FPV drones based on the fiber optic technology. In this video we can see, as you can see, lots of let's say protection configurations and protection, let's say, nets that were established by the Ukrainians along the main supply lines between the settlement of Yanakiv and the settlement of Sumy. So as you can see, maybe they are effective, these nets, but we see that the Russians have some possibilities to, let's say, avoid these traps and not to get there. Anyway, it brings some difficulties to FPV drone operators, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible to attack Ukrainian positions through these, let's say, nets. They are not like the solution to prevent FPV drone attack. They help, but not so much. So this is the situation in this direction. And that's it for today. Military with Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.